Hello, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. This is The Woman Who Reads. I find stories that I love on Arno Sleep on Reddit and read them. So this is going to be part 2 of a video that I just recorded and told you guys to wait until tomorrow, but here I am again. The title of that video and this one too is Creepy Reddit Story, The Storage Facility, Part 1, and this is Part 2. Alright, so let's get into it. So last time we stopped, Owen was on his first day, essentially, at the job after his orientation, and we're picking up after he talks about how he was looking at grainy black and white camera feeds. The restaurant where I worked before this had wine cellar, and we were strictly forbidden from opening on Tuesdays. And the produce warehouse before that made everyone sign a liability waiver that mentioned atmospheric irregularities, which have never materialized as far as I'm aware. The trick is to not ask why the rules exist. The why is where the trouble lives. I made it through my first night without incident. The phone rang 3 times at 2:47 and stopped on its own, which was within acceptable parameters. The fact that I had already internalized the concept of acceptable parameters for a phone that must never be answered did occur to me. I filed the thought under things to process later, and later never came. The first few weeks were quiet enough that I started to suspect the whole protocol sheet was an elaborate hazing ritual. I could picture Dale and the part-timers gathered somewhere laughing about the new guy who sat staring at camera 4 for 3 hours straight, waiting for a figure that was never going to appear. Then, camera 4 showed me the figure. And I stopped thinking it was funny. It was there for only 2 seconds, a shape in the hallway of Building B, standing perfectly still in the gap between 2 pools of fluorescent light. It was tall and thin, and its proportions were wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Something about the ratio of limb to torso, like a person reflected in a slightly warped mirror. Then the camera cycled to the next feed, and when it came back, the hallway was empty. I wrote in the logbook, 3:42 a.m., figure on camera 4, approximately 2 seconds. Did not investigate per protocol 6. Then I added, because I couldn't help myself, protocol says this is normal. Noted. The next morning, Dale read the entry and nodded. Good, he said. That's the right response. It is actually normal? It's normal for here. That's not the same thing. Dale picked up his clipboard. Exit strategy deployed. You should eat something. Low blood sugar makes people see things. I thought you just said it's normal? But he was already through the door, and the thought hung in the air like a half-open unit, which, per Protocol 3, I was supposed to walk away from. I was starting to realize that Dale's conversation style and the night shift protocols had a lot in common. On a Tuesday in my 4th week at about 1:30 a.m., a man showed up wanting access to his unit. He pulled in the parking lot in a beige sedan with no license plates. I watched on the monitor as he walked to the front gate with the measured, purposeful stride of someone arriving for an appointment. He pressed the intercom button. Hi there, he said. His voice was aggressively pleasant. I need to get to my unit. Protocol 5, simple enough. Come to the office with your ID, and I'll check you in. He appeared at the office door moments later. He was tall and thin, and wearing a pale blue polo shirt tucked into his khakis, like a youth pastor or someone about to sell you a timeshare. He smiled the way people smile when they're in a job interview, too wide, too practiced, deployed half a second too late. He handed me a driver's license. Gerald Moody. I checked the tenant list. Gerald Moody, Unit B7, account current since 2019. Everything checked out. Late night, I said, because I was still new enough to be a bit nosy. I need something from my unit, Gerald said. His smile held steady. It didn't waver or grow or shrink. It simply persisted, frozen in time. Sure, go ahead. Building B, straight out and to the left. I know where it is, Gerald said. There was no edge to it, no impatience, just a flat statement of fact, delivered through that motionless smile. I watched him on the cameras. He walked to Building B, entered the hallway, reached Unit B7, and stopped. He didn't reach for a key. He didn't touch the lock. He didn't shift his weight or check his phone. He stood in front of the closed metal door like a man studying a painting in a museum. head slightly tilted, arms at his sides, perfectly still. 4 minutes. I timed it because the stillness made me uncomfortable, and timing things is how I manage discomfort. At exactly 4 minutes, Gerald turned and walked back to his car and drove away. He came back the next night. Same time, same car, same ID, same smile. He walked to B7, stood for 4 minutes, and left. He came back the night after that, and the night after that, for 10 consecutive shifts. Gerald Moody arrived at 1:30 a.m., checked in, walked to his unit, stood motionless, and departed. On the 11th night, something changed. I watched him on the monitors. He walked to B7. He assumed the position. 4 minutes elapsed, but instead of turning to leave, Gerald Moody turned to face the camera. This should not have been possible. He looked directly into the lens. The camera is mounted flush against the ceiling at the far end of a 40-foot corridor. It's a small black dome, 40 feet away at ceiling height. There's no way to locate the lens from that distance, let alone determine its angle. Gerald found it anyway. He looked right at it, right at me. Then he mouthed 2 words. The resolution was garbage and his face was mostly shadow, and I can't tell you with certainty what the words were, but the movements were slow and deliberate, and I've replayed them in my head enough times to have narrowed it down to 2 possibilities: thank you or not yet. He walked away, drove off, and never came back. I checked the tenant list the next morning. Gerald Moody, Unit B7, account current. I mentioned the visit to Dale. Yeah, Dale said, nodding. That's Gerald. That's Gerald? That's your whole... He does that. He has for years. Don't worry about it. He looked directly into the camera, Dale, from 40 feet away, in the dark. Dale unwrapped a granola bar. Gerald's got good eyes, I guess. I tried a different approach. During my next shift, I walked to B7 myself, which I should not have done, but which I did because the not knowing was already worse than anything the knowing could deliver. The unit was locked, and I don't have a master key, so I did the only thing I could. I pressed my ear against a corrugated metal door. Silence. But not ordinary silence. Ordinary silence still has texture. The whisper of air, the hum of existence. This was something else. This was the silence of space unplugged from reality. Like the air inside Unit B7 had been replaced with something denser. Something that swallowed vibration on contact. Pressing my ear to that door was like pressing it to a hole in the new world. I pulled away, and the normal universe came flooding back. The buzz of the fluorescents, the drone of the HVAC, my own heartbeat, confirming I was still a living person in a building made of concrete and metal and nothing more. I never went back to B7. A few things about the facility itself, since you'll need the geography to understand what comes later. The buildings are old, not charmingly old, but old in the way things get when maintenance has been deferred so aggressively it qualifies as a philosophical position. The concrete floors are cracked in fractal patterns. The fluorescent lights flicker in rhythms that feel almost intentional. Slow, irregular pulses like a heartbeat that can't decide on a tempo. The hallways are long and narrow and smell like dust and faint chemical sweetness I've never identified. Dale says it's the sealant on the floors. There is no sealant on the floors. The office is a single room containing a desk, a phone, a wall of monitors, a radio, a mini fridge that hums at a pitch slightly too low for comfort, and a corkboard dense with memos. Most are from Dale and say things like, "Reminder, do not prop open unit doors," and "Notice, Unit A22 has been re-designated. Do not rent out." I have never been told what re-designated means. The word implies it's a process, which implies a chain of authority above Dale, which is something I try very hard not to think about. I checked A22 once during a perimeter walk. It looked like every other unit from the outside. Corrugated metal door, concrete threshold, standard issue sense of mild foreboding. But the padlock was missing. The door was unlocked. Protocol 3 says if you find an unlocked unit, lock it and don't look inside. Protocol 3 and I have what you might call a strained relationship. I lifted the door about a foot and pointed my flashlight inside. The unit was empty, except that empty is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that full sentence. The floor was bare concrete, yes, no boxes, no furniture, no forgotten lawnmower. But there was a circle drawn in the dead center of the floor, about 2 feet in diameter. It looked like white chalk or possibly salt. It was perfectly round in a way that freehand circles never are. The line was unbroken, the edges clean. Someone had drawn this, with tools or with care that bordered on devotion. I lowered the door and locked it, with a spare padlock from the office. The next day, I mentioned it to Dale, because I have a compulsive need to test the boundaries of his indifference. Don't worry about it, Dale said. The morning after that, a new memo appeared on the corkboard. It said, "Reminder, if you find an unlocked unit, lock it. Do not look inside. Don't worry about it." Dale says, "Don't worry about it," the way other people say "good morning" is his default response to 70% of all questions. The remaining 30% is divided between "that's not great" and simply walking away mid-conversation, which I interpret as the answer to your question is so far beyond the scope of human experience that language no longer suffices. This is hilarious. I'm really liking the story, and I hope you guys are too. So what I'm going to do is just end it here and continue part 3 in a bit. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you guys are loving what I'm putting down. Stay tuned for part 3. I'm probably going to record it right now and put it up right now because I'm really loving the story. I'm actually reading it for the first time with you guys, so I'm excited to know what comes next. Let's see what happens to Owen in part 3.